Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon, where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, one episode at a time, one day per week. And today, on the 14th of December, 2017, I just finished watching The Web of Fear, Episode 1. The first story, of course, in the next story in the marathon, of course, leading on directly from the end of The Enemy of the World. We open up with, of course, the Doctor and company in the TARDIS, spiraling out of control, with a rather tense scene of Jamie trying to fall on the console, basically so he can try to close the doors and save the day. That is something that really, it grabs your attention really quickly, and you get yourself pulled into the action, just like that, in the first, 2 minutes of the episode. Then we actually cut away after the dangers passed, and we actually get to the story proper, where it seems that Professor Travers from the Abominable Snowman has sold off his Yeti that he brought back, and has been tinkering with one of the control spheres, and he's able to reactivate it, and is unable to get the Yeti back to try to stop it from coming back alive and coming back into contact with the Great Intelligence. But of course, the owner of the museum he sold it to doesn't want to sell, and so the control sphere breaks in the window, gets back into the Yeti, and the Yeti actually transforms into what can only be described as a much more threatening model. Of course, this episode exists, the entire story except episode 3 exists, so we actually have all moving footage, and it's really good that we can see, some of the direction. This episode was directed, of course, by Douglas Camfield, who is my favorite director of Doctor Who in general, returning to the show since The Daleks' Master Plan, which was his last story, and this is his first directed story since The Time Meddler, really, to be in all nearly full. Only missing one episode, of course, which is great because that means we can actually see quite a lot of what his direction looks like and where he's going with things, and we can see how he frames a shot, and that's really, really nice. But a lot of the episode is focusing on the Doctor and company. There's a lengthy scene just talking in the TARDIS, which is kind of dull. It's kind of unnecessary. There's this whole thing where they're suspended in space, and then they get covered by a mysterious web, and that just goes on for just a little bit too long for my liking. It doesn't work nearly as well. It just sort of leaves you out of the action and doesn't really build suspense until, of course, the Doctor figures out how to get them out of this about halfway through the episode, and then we actually get onto Earth, where we seem to actually be in the future from the first scene with Travers, where they're on the London Underground, and the sets look amazing. The underground sets, they look like an actual subway station. Of course, the designers eventually got a note, because the people in charge of the Underground were convinced that the BBC just sort of snuck in and was like, and filmed without permission. But no, these are all sets. And it looks great for a set. The set design is just gorgeous. You can have a lot of fun just looking at the backgrounds. And Douglas Camfield really makes the shadows work well, and it helps to add just the feeling of suspense in the episode, that you get the world, that this world that we're inhabiting is creepy and dark, and you have the Dr. Jamie and Victoria coming across a guy who's dead and covered in cobwebs, with a sign that's saying, "Menace continues, Londoners flee." Like, we are in an evacuated London. Everything is weird, and there's soldiers in the underground. That are laying explosives. We don't know why, and then of course we get revealed that the Yeti are there. These new Yeti, and they have these guns that spray webbing out, and everything just looks more intimidating than the Web of Fear. Like, it looks more like a good old-fashioned monster. Like, we have something evil and something despicable. You have Jamie and Victoria basically caught by the soldiers while the Doctor's investigating just the explosives. And Jamie thinking, "Oh, this is a good idea. I just let the Doctor, do his thing, and we don't have to. So, it's not going to be like so they don't, come after us." He's like, "Yeah, no one's in the tunnel." Okay, so then they blow up the tunnel, because that's what they are doing. That's why they were laying the cable, to blow it up. That's our cliffhanger, just the tunnel exploding. well, we see an explosion, but the web seems to stop it, and the Doctor gets knocked out. So I don't know if that's necessarily effective or what. But yeah, outside of that, the episode is a very, very strong start to the story. You have just a little bit of pacing problems and just that little bit of too much, too much exposition here and there. But The Web of Fear, episode 1, gets a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is still the 14th of December 2017, and I just finished watching The Web of Fear, episode 2. And we actually improve on this episode, which is a bit of an oddity because this is one of those episodes where one of our main actors goes on vacation. This time, of course, it's the Doctor. The explosion happens from the cliffhanger, except the explosions don't actually go off. It just sort of, well, it doesn't really knock the Doctor out, but it makes him disappear for a while. He's essentially out of commission for quite a lot of the episode, which is, it's an okay plot device, but where it really, really works. It could have failed very easily, but it really works with the fact that it allows Jamie and Victoria to share in the spotlight, share in their relationship for a bit, and we get a lot of information on our supporting cast. I'm going to probably try to go through as much as I can. I probably won't hit everybody just because there's a lot of characters, and it's a lot packed into this 25-minute episode. As the script is very, very compact. So essentially, Jamie and Victoria, they have this moment. Jamie is really torn up about telling the soldiers that the tunnel was empty and that, they could go ahead and blow it up because he didn't think they were going to blow it up. But Victoria is the one who actually, well, she's the one who actually comforts him about it, and it's a very sweet scene, and they just have little moments like that. Jamie then makes it his responsibility to go with the soldiers to search for the Doctor, once, of course, Professor Travers and his daughter Anne come in, and Travers eventually recognizes them after Victoria reminds him of who they are, and it's one of those things that, he didn't really believe that they could time travel when it came to the Abominable Snowman, but seeing them now, like 30, 40 years later, and not have changed at all is, all the proof that he really needs to that, these two people, they're time travelers, and they are, they're the ones, and if the Doctor's here, that means he's the one who can defeat this menace, and, actually probably save the day when it comes to, the Earth. So Jamie goes off with the soldiers to try to find the Doctor, and this is where we get some great Yeti fighting action. Like, we get some great scenes in the tunnels of the Yeti just advancing, and they lumber towards the soldiers, and the soldiers are shooting them behind explosives, and the bullets are doing nothing. It's very much, they're alien robots, so they're not going to be killed with bullets, though apparently if you shoot them between the eyes, that will send them down. I think that's probably because I wouldn't say that's where the nerve centers are, but that might be like the computer processor, so, getting into that would probably shut it down completely. And of course you have the controls, they're of course controlled by the control spheres, but we haven't done much plot with those yet in this story. They seem to be bigger in the previous one than they were in this one. Moving on, you have Harold Chorley, our CD journalist. He is, again, he's very much a character who's a wimp. He's getting up in everyone's face. And there's one point where Aaron Travers basically just tells him to, just screw off. You're not a good journalist. You basically write a rag. It's a really good commentary, I think, on probably a lot of the journalism, because this is of the 60s where it was like, a lot of gossip columns and things started to come out. And those are just, they're horrid. They're still around today, and, they're horrible publications where it's like, no one really likes what you have to say because you don't have anything really interesting to say about things. You're just making conjecture and, saying, oh, well, I say this has happened. This is all allegedly, of course. But of course, Victoria then ends up going off of the tunnels because she, of course, overhears Travers and Anne suggesting that possibly the Doctor might actually be responsible for it because, he has only showed up both times when you needed to help from the Yeti. So, let's sort of connect the dots here, Dad. He just might be the problem in everything. So she goes off, and we get a lot of stuff of her wandering in the caves. We get a lot of character development. We have quite a few characters who get, a lot of screen time because, of course, the Doctor isn't here. We have Captain Knight, who is the fearless leader of the group. He's also portrayed with a very nuanced sort of the man who's at the end of his rope here. He hasn't given up hope, but he's just sort of been dealing with this for a while, and he's starting to have that fatigue. You have Staff Sergeant Arnold, who is just this old, gruff soldier who is no nonsense, and he's a very fun character just because of the performance. I'm not sure the actor who plays him, but the guy who plays him is just a really, really, dedicated performer and good on giving him this sort of gruffness. We have Lance and Weems, who are I guess you could call them, they're soldiers, but they're sort of lower down in the ranks. They are essentially used for a really good expedition dump where they try to go over the facts with each other, try to figure out, well, what are these things? Like, there's this lovely thing where it's like, this is bacterial warfare from another government superpower, not actually believing it's aliens, even though, it's aliens. We know it's aliens. We know the great intelligence is an alien, and that's how, that's how the stories worked. And then we have, we meet so there's also mention made that ammunition has not made it, and then we actually ends up meeting the driver of the lorry in charge of bringing the ammunition to the soldiers, Private Evans, who is, God, he is just, he's a coward, but he's the sort of the good-natured coward. I wonder, it'll be interesting to see what the story wants to do with him, because he gets some funny lines, and he's a comedy Welshman. Every story could use a comedy Welshman. Comedy Welshmen are usually great for stories. And then you, of course, have the big cliffhanger that this fungus that the Yeti have been laying, because you, of course, see in the spring cobwebs, it's been spreading throughout the tunnels. And Jamie and Evans, because half the group decides to go back. Evans decides, I'll go on with Jamie, only to save his own neck. They go on, and then they see the fungus has completely, is just in front of them and behind them. They are cut off completely. And, I have to say, the direction of this story, the use of shadows and just some low lighting really helps you get the creep factor. And Douglas Camfield doesn't use uses very little music, and it's all stock music, and it's all stock creepy music. And it works very effectively for what he has to do. And, just the episode just keeps the tension grabbing. So I'm going to give The Web of Fear, episode 2, a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 15th of December 2017, and I just finished watching The Web of Fear episode 3. And this is the only missing episode of this serial, and for full disclosure, I'm watching the Telesnap reconstruction included in the iTunes purchase of the story and on the DVD release of the story. I own both this version. I watched the DVD one. They're the same version. It doesn't matter. And this is the first episode where we're introduced to Colonel Lethebridge-Stewart. He is a character sort of thrown in the middle of the game, mainly because there's this idea floating around that someone might be working with the Yeti, and it's a great little idea, and you have this suspicion it's possibly this Colonel guy, but of course he takes charge because Colonel outranks Captain, so he's now in charge of the operation, and everyone is sort of filtering through him, and he is your character who you sort of don't know if you can trust him. The Doctor seems to trust him, but the Doctor is also threatened by him when they initially meet, as you can see by the telesnap that I included as the focal point for this episode. And then you have this episode really doesn't feature any Yeti until the cliffhanger, which is, of course, the Yeti actually breaking into the base and attacking Professor Travers, which I don't know if the cliff exists or not. I mean, I'm guessing it does, because there's probably a cliffhanger reprise in the next episode, but as it stands, this one just uses telesnaps, so it's kind of weird. Like, it's weird. They used the film for the cliffhanger reprise of episode 2, but they couldn't really seem to find a way to get it for episode 3. It's just one of those things that it just bugs me a little bit, because it's sort of something that you think, well, it's a cliffhanger reprise. They will be, reprising it like they naturally should, and it's because the footage exists, why not use it? But again, this was a rushed release, so I don't really fault them on that. But you have a lot of this episode is just sort of planning. We get in depth that the Yeti weren't the first to appear. It started with a fog, which people would go into and then just disappear. They would not be found, and they just have vanished into thin air almost, which is a creepy idea as it is. And then that the fungus started to appear, people would go on the underground, people would go into that and disappear. And then the Yeti started to appear, and then they had to evacuate London. And then we really get the idea that these Yeti are sort of the Yeti Mark II, because obviously their costumes are different, and they acknowledge that it has changed. The Doctor, of course, theorizes that it might be for the environment that it's changed, but it's a really creepy idea that the Yeti are here that the Yeti here are not the Yeti that we saw, the same Yeti that we saw in, of course, The Abominable Snowman, and that sort of helps keep the story fresh and not just be a rehash of The Abominable Snowman. It also helps that just sort of the dialogue in this one is much snappier than The Abominable Snowman. This is a dialogue-heavy episode, so there aren't any points where you don't get an idea of what's going on. It's a very talky episode. It's a very let's get up to speed, and it's sort of necessary because the last episode was playing with character dynamics. The first was setting up this scenario, and now this one is our let's get us moving into the plot. I'm glad that Victoria and the Doctor are back. Jamie and Evans are still wandering around by the end of it. They are. Evans just proves how much of a coward he is. He's just full of cowardice, and it's great. He's a great character. He's not a character you love to hate, but he's almost like just this harmless, like I'm a coward. And Evans seems to know that he's sort of holding everyone back, and it's really good. I really like Evans as a character, and it's just sad that this episode doesn't exist, so we can't really see it. But again, I'm just glad that the rest of the episodes exist, so we can actually see the amazing direction. And you just sort of have Harold Shorley sort of. Well, initially they're like, right, you're just going to be our liaison. Everyone's going to send notes through, and you can just be the organizer, so you can actually try to do something useful. But then, of course, Victoria told him about the TARDIS, and now he leaves to find it, possibly meaning that he might be the traitor. It's sort of playing with misdirection. Like you don't quite know who's going to betray who, but someone's going to betray everybody else. There's one traitor. There could be multiple. Who even knows? That is just great. So, that's really where the episode stands. Of course, ending with Travers being attacked. So I'm going to give the Web of Fear, episode 3, another 10 out of 10, even though it's not missing. Even though it is missing. Alright, it is the 15th of December 2017, and I just finished watching The Web of Fear, episode 4. And if the last episode is where the plot really gets going, this is where we build up all the tension and throw suspicion on our characters. Mainly the fact that the idea that there's a traitor among the group is very strong, as Travers is kidnapped by the Yeti, possibly throwing suspicion on him that he might be working with him, because he was never quite the same when he got back from the monastery in The Abominable Snowman. His daughter even says so. The suspicion, and the Doctor even notes that as when he gets back, he has this amazing speech about the intelligence being this formlessness, and how really we shouldn't be trusting anyone. There's also Chorley, who has disappeared, and the Doctor, Victoria, and Jamie have followed him, but can't get to the TARDIS. They think he might have gone to the TARDIS, but hasn't, and the Doctor's actually able to collect some of the fungus, and is able to not necessarily use it, but he's able to have it so they can sort of get an idea that of its properties and maybe what it's doing here, what its purpose is. And they use a tobacco tin belonging to Evans. But then, when the Doctor gets it back to the lab and is handed to it from Evans, and Evans leaves, it's revealed to be empty again. Which puts suspicion onto him, only sort of built upon by the audience when everyone else who touches the fungus seems to get hurt, but Evans is able to touch it at one point in the episode and is unharmed. So is he the evil one? You really don't know. It's sort of... And the big cliffhanger reveal is the Yeti coming into the base because they're using the little statues, like they did in The Abominable Snowman, basically to track their movement, to be as sort of like homing devices. And the Brigadier and the Colonel Lethebridge-Stewart has one, of course by accident, as that's how they know, because a lot of this episode is mounting a rescue on the TARDIS, where we get some brilliantly directed scenes of just soldiers, rushing around above ground and having their moment to just sort of attack the Yeti, one even going at it with an anti-tank rifle, and that doesn't do anything to the Yeti, which is a really great way of making the Yeti look and feel like they're a real, solid threat. And we have, of course, bringing it back, the Yeti coming into the base when it's really Travers' daughter, the Doctor, Jamie, Victoria, and the Colonel left, because everyone else gets attacked. The Doctor goes up with Captain Knight. Captain Knight gets killed by the Yeti as the Doctor's finding circuits, and then Travers comes in as a Yeti, and that's where we end the episode. It's just sort of, the episode is one that just builds on itself. It's a great example of how to do a good story, and it just builds so much suspense. And the direction is great. The action sequence is great. The music is excellent. Douglas Camfield outdoes himself with this episode, so I'm going to give The Weapon of Fear episode 4 a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 16th of December 2017, and I just finished watching The Web of Fear episode 5, and the first big reveal of this episode is that Travers was not, in fact, the traitor, that he has just had his mind taken over by the Great Intelligence, much like Padmasambhava was in The Abominable Snowman. And that this is an episode that actually takes place in real time, as the Doctor has 20 minutes to give himself up to the Intelligence, who wish to do the old sci-fi concept of draining his brain so it can gain more intelligence and take over the world, which the Doctor even says, yes, in 20 minutes I will comply willingly. Now, it needs the Doctor to comply willingly, or this will not work, which, even though that's not explained, I will buy it, just because this is an alien force that we don't really have we can't really have a human understanding of. It's just this creature from outside of space, outside of our own time, and it's just sort of a mass of just sort of, intelligence floating around in space. So I will buy it for this time that, this is in fact, the intelligence is in fact, telling the truth here, that it needs the Doctor's intelligence and it's his brain and his sanity, which is something that, and there's even the Doctor quips that, once it happens, it'll leave him like a child, and Jamie and Victoria will have to take care of him. And Victoria, she doesn't have much to do with this, but what she does do is she's taken hostage, and it is actually gives Jamie the best moment to shine, just to show how much Jamie really has an affection for her, as he's essentially taking a lot of the episode wanting to just go and rescue her, blunder in, sanity be damned, like, no, I want to save Victoria, because Victoria is my friend, and, she's worthy, me and the Doctor are really the only family she has left. It's a very, very powerful performance from Fraser Hines, and also a very, very subtle performance from Fraser Hines, as he does it not in too many words to be, just not to be, sort of wrapped up in the words behind it, just in the emotions that yes, Victoria is missing, and he wants to try to save her. You have, we also have still the suspicion that one person is still under the control of the Intelligence. Evans has the idea that it's either the Colonel Lethebridge-Stewart or Jamie, and so this also keeps up the suspicion, especially as Staff Sergeant Arnold is back into the picture, as somehow he survived the fungus, which leads me to believe he might just be our traitor, just because he somehow survived the fungus, which, no one else seems to have been able to survive, leading up to this point. The fungus was something that, no one could possibly live through. You would die if you got into the fungus. Pushing through killed you. And it's something that, and you also have, Anne Travers actually hitting her big moment to shine, as she and the Doctor, as scientists, work out a way to essentially get the Yeti to control them. They mess around with the control sphere quite a bit, and they get it to work on remote control, and they have a box that'll stop a control sphere, so they can actually go capture a Yeti and get their own one, which is sort of what they do. That's what they lead the episode ending. But the big episode ending is that everyone gets pushed out of the base because the fungus just sort of breaks in and spreads everywhere, and it is a very good scene of just the fungus causing all this sort of devastation and destruction, as, just sort of breaks in, and you think this might be, that we could be very much leading towards the end of the story. This is an excellent episode, even though it is an episode 5. It doesn't have any of the pacing problems that most episode 5s have. Colonel Lethbridge-Stewart is also great, as he's still in control, even if most of his men are dead. It's a small group, and we don't know if they're able to do things. You don't see anything from Harold Chorley, which is interesting, because we haven't gotten the fate of him. We still think he might also be possibly working with the Intelligence, just because he's still disappeared. He is nowhere to be found, and the audience really doesn't know what his fate is to be, if he's going to be, continuing on in the story at all. Is he going to show up again. It's just in this episode, it keeps giving you the questions, and you just sort of you want to move on to the next episode for the answers, and it's giving us to a what is a that's really what a good episode should do, to give us the questions that we want to know, so we can find our way into the finale with the sufficient knowledge that everything is good. I'd also have to say the direction in this is great. Like, we have so many shadows, all down the tunnels, which just look excellent. And we have a Yeti hiding in shadow at one point that jumps out at Victoria and Travers. Travers and Victoria have these great moments as Professor Travers gets unhypnotized, and he and Victoria try to escape, and they fail miserably. They can't escape just because they are stuck there. That is their fate, so to speak. They have to be stuck there. So that is really, everything is just sort of building up to what is going to be a great conclusion of the story. So I'm going to give The Web of Fear episode 5 another 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 17th of December 2017, and I just finished watching The Web of Fear episode 6, which finishes out the story, The Web of Fear, with an excellent ending. We have everything really sort of coming together, and we actually get a pretty stellar plan from the intelligence. He wants to use the Doctor to take over the world, and the Doctor decides to actually try to flip the tables by just crossing the wires in the thing that is going to allow them to take over the world. I do apologize, as I seem to be catching a cold, and it's just a little difficult for me to speak right now. But you have the story finishing in an excellent way, as we have all our surviving characters, Chorley reappearing, basically being herded into I'm guessing it's a terminal where the intelligence has its base, and it has this pyramid where the Doctor is going to have to sit under and be drained, whereas the Doctor is going to have their Yeti on their side, and they give it off to Jamie so he can sort of spring the trap on them, as he hopes. Of course, this is until the end, where we get a big twist where the Doctor actually fails a little bit because he was trying to drain the intelligence, because that's all it is it's an intelligence. So they were going to try to drain it and have it basically be there for basically there for the end of the story. So you have the story ending in a very, very, very nice way, as everything just sort of comes together and creates the ending, as you have just the Doctor losing. And of course the big ending is that everybody pretty much wants the Doctor's autograph, because he saved the day and they want an interview, so they just sort of go off. And you have what is a really, really good, solid conclusion to the story. It works, and it gives us what you've been asking for. It sort of ends the story just as well as it could. So then this is an episode where just everything just sort of wraps up in a nice little bow. The direction is great, and it's one that I don't want to spoil too much about, but it's just really good. So I'm going to give The Web of Fear episode 6 another 10 out of 10, ending this story. And then we, of course, average out every score for the past 6 episodes of The Web of Fear to give the total score of a 9.83 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching this edition of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And then we will move on to the next episode in Fury from the Deep.